sitting. If I were to make the analogy, Jim, people are either sitting as if they were working double shifts or overtime, or sitting as if they were competing with the same amount of hours as a business CEO. I've come to the belief that sitting is the new profession.
I can tell you, I've spent 20 years working on this stuff. I've never heard anyone put it better than that. You are sort of the archetype, if I may, of what happens with patients I've seen in the clinic over years. You're potentially impacting your risk of heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure, and so on, and cancer even, and so on and so forth.
This thing right here, getting up, moving your body up, something that we're all built in for doing, moving. It's a simple idea, yet so many people find this so difficult.
Because it's like seeing a patient for me, Tony, if you don't mind me saying it this way. I know you're not.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
But it is, because before you were like the coolest guy, but you could tell there was a bit of there was a bit of, but now you've got this poise, and I want to like stand up straight talking to you. And this is where a podcast like this is, you're not offering people $10 or $100, you're offering people much more.
You've reached the Tony Moze podcast, interviewing the most influential people around the globe. He's a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional and entrepreneur with the goal to educate and inspire you to fulfill your dreams. Whether that's transitioning into a new job, increasing skills, or turning your hobbies into a money-making gig, Tony shows that the world is big and opportunities are endless. And now, without further ado, the Tony Moze podcast.
This is like really interesting in that you are sort of the archetype, if I may, of what happens with patients I've seen in the clinic over years. And a couple of things you said, I mean, in a sense, we sort of call this the fidget factor. By that, I mean, it is fascinating to hear from you that you, as you say, how can it be that you've lost, 30 odd pounds, much more muscular, feel bright, energetic, and yet you started with these really simple, basic little things. As you said, you were getting yourself up, you were doing a little bit of this. It was just the smallest bit of change. And now a year later, look at you, right? And this is exactly what we see. It is like what you've done is release that innate capacity to move. And in so doing, it starts off with the smallest things. As you say, it's like a little flame ignites a fire. But we'll come back to that metaphor in a second. But as you started, it's sort of like it's more, I would say it's more like an awakening. And in that, the little walk became a run, and the little run became a bicycle, right? You sort of, and all of a sudden, this is now integrated into everything you do. And you said two interesting things. You said many things, of course, that were interesting, but two or three interesting things I picked up on. The first was that this sort of simple stuff of getting up in between meetings, just walking from here to there. And now you're sort of doing athletic things like on the bicycle, moving and so on and so forth. Yeah. That is exactly what happens. And you said going to the gym. That is fantastic. You might say, but hang on, Dr. J. You're not about going to the gym. Wrong. I'm about getting you up. And now, if sort of in releasing that energy, you go to the gym. We love that. We love it. It is fantastic. And the other thing you said, which is actually also really, really interesting, the second thing is that you started doing weights and you're more muscular. And okay, your body weight may be, 20 or 30 pounds lighter, but now think about it. You're more muscular, but in also being more muscular, if I may say this, and anyone who doesn't agree with me, look back at the previous video. Look how you hold yourself. Right now, look how you hold yourself. You're poised. No, I'm being deadly serious. It's a stronger poise, right? This is a man with greater authority. And the third thing you said, which is also really important, without necessarily saying, I'm going on a diet. I changed my diet. What did you say? I'm doing certain protein. I'm doing all of a sudden the diet, instead of it becoming the most sedentary diet, if you like, the laziest diet, can't be bothered to do this, I'll grab a box of that. Can't be bothered to cook or make a protein, whatever it is. I'm just going to grab that. It's now become this sort of purposeful exercise in, I can see my body's getting better. I'm now going to put in decent fuel. And you're almost, and I could almost sort of write a book about you in the sense that, this is sort of like, it's almost like a teaching through experience, isn't it? It's one thing to talk the talk, it's another thing to walk the talk. And this is like one of the most beautiful examples. And I can just see it for anyone who's interested, you should look back at the previous video, because it's like seeing a patient for me, Tony, if you don't mind me saying it this way. I know you're not.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
But it is, because before you were like the coolest guy, but you could tell there was a bit of there was a bit of, but now you've got this poise, and I want to like stand up straight talking to you. It's almost like a military air you've got. So super cool, and congratulations. And if I may, please,
sure.
And maybe we speak more sooner than 4 years or 5 years, whatever it's been. But I get the sense that it's sustainable. You could keep doing this. And I've got one other thing for you, and you're going to hate me for saying this, and you'll probably cut it out, which is cool.
Let's hear it.
I've never asked you about such things, and please don't answer enough. But were you to in your life have a partner or a serious friend, whatever it is, she or he, whatever it may be, that I hope for you that person is encouraging, is supportive, and vice versa, you are to them as they are to you. And it is extremely important to surround yourself by people who are going to be part of your positive team. We all know that, what it's like with kids. I've got, God forbid your kids get with bad friends. Those bad friends will drag them down. But be the good friend, right? And lift people up. So I hope that's in your future.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. And I'm thank you for wishing this upon me. I have to say this. People are going to be listening to this. And I know people who have been around me, they know this of me. But, sometimes I use metaphors, but there's this whole idea of like, I think they said something about character. It's like basically what you do behind the closed curtains. These past 8 years, I mean, eventually it just starts to overflow and it starts to spill out into the public. But like, how about this? Last year, I actually finally bought the treadmill that I have in my apartment, right? That people would see me on Zoom calls. They're like, are you using that? I'm like, are you using a treadmill? I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh my God. Like, and I have to talk to you about this because I've been this person who embodies this whole thing that I've learned from your book, from you and your studies and everything like that, right? Like the whole idea after I eat, directly after I eat, I get up and I walk for 15 minutes, especially what I was doing like these past several months. Like I'll eat something, especially a carb food, jump on the treadmill for 15 minutes. And I remember what you said for miles per hour. I would put it for at least anywhere between 1.2 to 1.8 miles per hour, which is almost like a zombie's walk. And people are like, no, you have to walk fast. I'm like, nope. And I feel great. I don't gain the weight. Sometimes I'll lose. There'll be days I'll lose or times I lose weight. People in the office, I was working in this tech company, and they always saw me. Even my managers, they're like, wow, they're like, I should be getting up more. Like, yeah, I mean, like you have a moment. Like, and I'm gonna tell you, I have some things that I wrote here too. It almost sounds a little poetic from what I've learned and studied from people. But yeah, like that has been my thing. Of course I do intermittent fasting, but like my thing nowadays is definitely a movement type lifestyle. I'm always getting up and I'm always moving. There's times I do, that I don't, but I do. And I was just in Spain. And it's so funny that even the culture out there, when I thought I was the most sedentary, I actually moved the most, as a matter of fact. I was just in Spain. I was walking 20,000 steps versus here where I only walk up between 8 to maybe 15,000. That's actually through effort here in America. While in Spain, I'm on vacation and I'm getting up and I'm just, let me go walk to the grocery store. Let me go walk down here just to go look at this. Oh, I got to go do an errand. Let me go do that. And not even looking, I'll look at my phone that tracks my steps and I go, holy moly, I did 20 to 25,000 steps today. And I didn't even notice that. But I'm very happy. I try to tell people this. Last time I talked to you, I had some friends. We had a big feast. As usual, people get a big feast and like, oh, I don't want to do anything. And I'm like, guys, watch this. Let's get up. Let's just take a nice, easy stroll and let's see how we feel. And every time after they eat in this big, typically carb-loaded meal, they'll get up and walk for 15 minutes, and now they feel happier and they're lighter and they're just so excited. And I remember I was walking with this married couple, and they did that with me, and the wife was just jumping around like, oh my God, I'm so happy that we did this. And I swear, every time, like, I swear, like your book has been so impactful to me. Like, I know I should be buying loads and loads of your book so I could spread throughout the office, because like I'm embodying this and people see it and they like know they should, but like I try to explain it to them. And this is the reason why I have you on the podcast, so that you could explain through your research, through your knowledge about why is it so important to be getting up? Why is prolonged sitting bad for you? So again, like I have been the guy, the poster boy, the poster boy for getting up and moving. And, again, I really thank you for that.
You don't need to thank me at all. No, it's the opposite. If I may put it differently back to you, you owe me no thanks at all. Can you begin to imagine how it feels for me to listen to a young gentleman who has read the work of the lab? It's not my work, it's the work of a big lab. And it's great to do work in a laboratory and good science. It's beautiful. But it's beyond beautiful to listen to a young gentleman such as yourself who's read the science and said, I'm going to act on it. I'm going to do it. And it's my thanks that actually go to you 100%, plus the fact that you're doing this as a podcast to generate interest and hopefully, it should be profitable for you too, because therefore it's sustainable. Even better. So that's my first comment. Second comment. You said two. I don't want to say you said two interesting things, because that implies that the rest of it wasn't interesting. That's not what I'm saying at all. Let me pick up on two things you said. Two things you said. I'm going to address the first thing. But you mentioned going to Spain, and then you mentioned the feast. I'm going to pick up on that first, and then I'm going to talk about, you said this several times, that after each meal you go for 15 minutes walk. I'm going to pick up on that second, because it's important, I think, to really explain why you do that and what the data behind it do. Because I must say, when I saw the data, it changed my life as well. So let me pick up on those two things, if I may, please.
Yes.
So the first thing, a colleague of mine from UCLA, called Professor Peter Butler, said to me, Jim, we need to do a study. I said, okay. He says, yeah. He says, here in California, we have so many, young students, even living in beautiful California, who are really battling overweight. This is an epidemic amongst young people as well as older people. It's not age specific at all. And I'll tell you the other thing, as an aside, is obesity rates amongst boys is skyrocketing in certain countries and accelerating massively fast in other countries amongst girls. Some countries have horrific situation in the Middle East, United States, and all the European countries are now catching up. They're all following the US trajectory. So this is international, all ages. So he said to me, Jim, we send some of our students away to do, good projects abroad, and that can be in sort of South America, it can be in Africa, wherever it is. And he said, all of those kids, when they go away, when they send us their reports, these kids, on average, lose 10 to 20 kilos, 20 to 40 pounds. He said, Jim, we've got to study it. And I said, Peter, what do we need to study? It's obvious. If you completely change a person's environment, like when you go to Barcelona, right? Spain. I assume you went to Barcelona. Actually, I don't know that. Do you go to Barcelona? Where were you in Spain?
Not this trip, but last trip I have. Yeah,
I remember you mentioned something about Barcelona. I do remember that, weirdly enough. Anyway, but so he was. So I said, look, when your students go away, they completely change everything about their environment. Mm-hmm. They're more active. They're doing these projects in the communities. They're doing the teaching, the house building. They've completely changed their diet, and they're part of a community with each other, right? Whether it's Habitat for Humanity, whatever it may be, right? You know what I mean? They're all doing it together. They're part of it. So they're eating their meals together. They're doing the projects together. And of course, they're innately active. They're not going to gyms. There ain't no gyms in some of these places, right?
Yeah.
And when I float between France and the United States, and a lot is made of the cultural differences, but the cultural differences, interestingly, aren't something you necessarily think about, right? You don't sort of go to, in your case, to Spain, or in these kids' case, to Costa Rica, wherever it may be, and think, oh, the environment's different, I better do more walking. You don't even think it. It is innate, right? It's part of the structure you find yourself in.
Yeah.
So a lot of people watching your podcast, the millions of people watching your podcast, tens of millions maybe, are thinking to themselves, well, it's a bit irrelevant to me, right? Because I don't have the time or the money to change my environment. I mean, it's this crazy talk, but actually it isn't, because actually each of us do create environments around ourselves. We just don't think about it, right? Mm-hmm. We don't think about it because our friends are our friends, our routines, our habits are our habits. Just like you were saying before in your previous life, every day with a T in it is pizza day, right? And so though we have built an environment around ourselves, but we have no awareness of it. And what you're telling me, and what I'm hearing from you, from others, is that if you can become aware of those things around you and how much it influences you, because we know from the kids at UCLA, they go abroad, that's all they do, they're not going on a diet, and yet they're coming back thinner than if they went to a $20,000 a week health camp.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if we can say, look, the status quo ain't right in my life. The status quo is not right. I've got to create a new environment for myself. And I tell you, that can begin as something as simple as clearing up my house.
Yeah.
I live in a pit. I don't, by the way, but I'm telling you about a student I worked with. It was a young woman. She literally lived in a pit. And I gave her first task was literally to clean her house. I said, come back to clinic in a week. Because she was there with her mother. Her mother told, she said you should see this girl's house. Anyway, that's your first job. And it's like what you said at the very beginning, yeah? You started with these simple things, just get up. It's the smallest thing. And A led to B, led to C, led to D. So in other words, having an awareness that the environment is incredibly important, but not believing that you can't change it. And if you think you can't change your friends, then you haven't made a new friend for a while.
This is so good. I'm glad that you said this, because I'll be honest with you, like you wished something upon me, and I'm glad for maybe my upbringing. I had, a mom who was like, she's like, she was a go-getter, and, and it's also, I think my dad too, but my mother was always like, she was very headstrong, and she like persisted towards things. And I'm like, man, like I learned that from her. Right. And, I'll tell you, like in the office, majority of the people did not walk. And I'm just like, man, I could easily be engulfed by this kind of lifestyle, by this kind of culture there. Mm-hmm. But what directed me even more was the person who I was intimate with, which was a significant other, so it's one thing I'm in the office because I can leave that. It's the next thing. Perhaps I'm living with an individual, or I'm seeing this individual a lot more than a 9-to-5 job. And that person eventually got to me because every time I said, all right, we just ate. Can we just get up and just go walk? Because right now I am, you're talking to me and you want me to listen to you. I'm being honest. I'm going to say this out loud. I'm just saying, you want me to listen to you, but I'm falling asleep and it's 8:00 at night. And I think if we could get up, we could take a walk. It's nice outside. I won't be all bogged down by this heavy food that we just ate, this carb-laden food, whether it's potatoes, even if we had, some meat, some protein or whatever, I always get bogged down. And so eventually it started getting into like, oh man, like, I don't feel like getting up. I don't want to get up, to me, it was said. So eventually me and taking that and me living that same way, where it's like every time after we ate, anytime we woke up in the morning, I didn't want to get up, and that was affecting me. And you're so right about the environment, quote unquote. I mean, like that was my environment, the person who I was very intimate with. And so you just getting back to what you said, it is super important to be mindful of the people, places, and things that you associate or immerse yourself with, because they also have an effect on you.
Yeah. Now, let me pick up on the second point. You've made it several times. It's this idea that once you eat a meal, you take a 15-minute walk, you feel heavy from the food, whatever it is. But let me, if I may please, just take a minute to backtrack to the science, because the science is extraordinary. In the lab, we brought in a whole load of volunteers. And we said to the folk, this is not going to be a difficult experiment, because what we want you to do is eat your breakfast, lunch, and dinner with us and do your normal stuff, whether it's your computer work, FaceTime, Facebooking, Insta, whatever it is. And while you're with us in the research center, what we're going to be doing is continuously monitoring your blood glucose. And you can do that now with this a lot of extraordinary technologies that allow that to be quite easy to do. At the time, it wasn't quite so easy, and we did it with precision, but nonetheless, that's exactly what we did. So our volunteers came in, we gave them breakfast and monitored their blood sugar. They then went to they did virtual work. They then sat down in a virtual office and did their work, then stopped for lunch, had lunch, like most people, most 60% of people in the States, at their desk. We all know this. And then, did their work in the afternoon, probably with a little bit of a nap. Most of us feel a bit sleepy after lunch. And then they had their dinner, and after dinner did online shopping, obviously a Netflix or two, and before going to bed. And we measured their blood glucose throughout that entire period of time. Now what happens, and this is completely normal, is that for each of the volunteers, and everyone is remarkably similar, I'll tell you, after each meal, blood glucose goes up like a mountain and goes down over about 90 minutes, breakfast. Lunch goes up like a mountain, goes down after about 90 minutes. And sorry to be boring, after dinner, goes up like a mountain and goes down after 90 minutes. Okay, that's completely normal. We then did another day of experiment with exactly the same meals, exactly the same instructions, but one singular difference. The singular difference was that after each of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the same meals, our volunteers took a 15-minute stroll at 1.5 miles an hour, which is strolling speed, zombie speed, as you put it. I've never been a zombie, so I don't know. Zombie speed after each of those 3 minutes, meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And here's the extraordinary thing. Literally a stroll. I'm not talking about a walk, a stroll for 15 minutes after each of those meals. Breakfast, instead of it being a mountain, it became a hillock. Lunch, instead of it being a mountain, it became a hillock. Sorry to be boring. Dinner. Instead of it being a mountain, it was just a little hill. So what had happened was that 15-minute walk had converted the blood glucose excursion after each meal. Instead of it being a mountain, it was a hill. It had halved what's called the postprandial glycemic excursion. The postprandial means after the meal, blood glucose excursion, elevation. It had halved it. And you might say, well, that's interesting science, right? Not bad. But what's really important about that is one of the biggest predictors of type 2 diabetes is the size of that mountain after each meal. Is the size of the mountain after each meal is predictive of a person's risk of developing type 2 diabetes in part. And therefore, by halving it, you potentially can halve a person's risk of type 2 diabetes. Okay, it's big, it's huge, potential. Now, the same data are true from other people's labs for things like blood lipids, those sort of cholesterol-like molecules associated with heart attacks and so on. And the other and as you're thinking about all of this, the other type of chemicals, that 15-minute stroll gives you not only the chemicals associated with cholesterol and heart attacks, not only the blood glucose associated with type 2 diabetes, but also the insulin-like growth factors associated with cancer. So all of a sudden, what you're saying is, you have a big meal, let's just go out for a stroll so I don't fall asleep. Okay, you're not going to fall asleep. But from a medical perspective, you're potentially impacting your risk of heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure, and so on, and cancer even, and so on and so forth, by the simplest act of taking a short walk after each meal. It is profound. And that is the science you keep referring to. As you say, well, after my meal, just because it's more friendly, it's actually a nicer interaction with my partner or my friend or my kid, whatever it may be, to go for a stroll after my meal. And that can actually, when some of the patients I used to work with could not get out of their wheelchairs because of the excess body weight, I would say, you can't do 15 minutes, total respect, right? But when the commercials come on TV, do a little walk across the living room, right? When the program ends, when the episode ends, while the next one is loading up, we know what next episode loading, right? Yeah. While the next episode is loading up, for goodness sake, get up and do a little stroll around your house. And you might say, well, hang on, Jim, that's not the 15 minutes. But remember what you said at the very beginning. It is those small starts that make the big changes. And that's what's fascinating here.
Are you enjoying this episode? Please give a like, comment, follow, or subscribe. And now, back to the Tony Moze Podcast.
Yeah. You said a lot of things that I want to talk. I want to, a lot of things here I want people to hear and touch. I want to touch upon, but this thing right here, getting up, moving your body up, something that we're all built in for doing, moving. It's a simple idea, yet so many people find this so difficult, whether they say it explicitly to me, like, I know I should be doing it, but I don't feel like, man, I got to get up. Like it's simple, but yet we make it so hard for ourselves. Say it again. For ourselves. Exactly. That's what I meant to say. We make it so hard for ourselves. Like, how about this? You just remind me every time there's a meeting, if they're like, we just want you to hear this meeting. We have maybe an all hands where we have the executives going to tell us about a new rollout of a product. The moment I hear that, I put on my earbuds, turn on Zoom on my mobile phone and just walk with it. If they're just talking, I'm going to use it. And I use that moment to either maybe I walk down the street or I'm walking around the office. Like, why do I need to sit down to listen? I'm hearing you even better when I'm walking. Maybe I'll look at my phone, look at the PowerPoint presentation. But I try to use every ounce I can to use the treadmill in my office or in my home, to walk outside down the street during a break, to take that 12 o'clock maybe to eat a little bit, because they'll give you, at least the last jobs I've had, got a whole hour break, to using maybe 20 to 30 more minutes of that eating time, to then using that latter 30 minutes to walk around the office, to walk around my neighborhood, to walk on the treadmill. I mean, it's really, and I'm not speed walking, so it's just a simple thing to do. And I just put it in my head, I said, dude, you're just getting up and taking the left leg, putting it in the front, taking the right leg, putting it in the front. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science, but we make it that way.
Okay, so I've got two reflections for you. The first thing is your exact expression, which I'm not going to remember and probably use myself, is I put it in my head. What do you actually mean? What you actually mean by that is it is not an idea that naturally flicks into your head to convert that sort of conference meeting to a walk meeting, but you put it in your head. You actively put an idea in your head. I put it in my head. That is really powerful as a concept. And the other thing you've said, which I was trying to think of, because I know you like metaphors, I was trying to think of a metaphor. And, one idea sort of crossed my mind. As you said, getting up, and like a friend will say to you, getting up, like, I've got to get up. It's like, are you serious? Like, if you said, okay, I'll tell you what, let's just take my example of, every time the commercials come on, I'll pay you $1,000 to get up. Somebody would actually say to you, are you crazy? You will pay me $1,000 to get up at every commercial. You said, oh, no, actually, I didn't mean that. I meant $100. I said, are you crazy? You're going to pay me $100 to get up every time the commercials come on. Said, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant $10. Are you... Right, so it's carrot stick, isn't it? It's, who wouldn't get up for $10, let alone $100 or $1,000 when the commercials come on? But when you say to a friend, hey, let's just get up and have a stroll, we got to get up. And this is where a podcast like this is, if you're not offering people $10 or $100, you're offering people much more. How much do you think a second of life costs?
A second?
How much do you think a second of life, when it comes to the final moment, and you say, I wish I had an extra hour to tell the people I love how much I love them, or to put right the things I want to put right, and to correct the wrongs, and to ask forgiveness, whatever those things are, how much do you think you would pay at the final moment to have an extra hour of life?
I mean,
there's no price on life.
Yeah,
there's no price.
There's no price. Exactly. It's priceless.
Right. And when people, God forbid, are suffering with pain from their diabetes because of the peripheral neuropathy, from the nerve damage, how much do you think those people pay? Because it costs people a fortune to pay for those medicines. And that's not even a fortune for the pain. How much do you think people would pay to have that pain taken away? Yeah. How much do you think people would pay not to have the heart attack? Not, because we're used to looking at the world in this sort of bizarre monetary sense, not realizing that actually what you're offering people is more valuable than $10 to get up every time the commercials come on. But what the podcast is providing the value proposition. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain to push out of the sofa, but when you realize what's at stake, whether that's just a laugh, having a bit of a much better conversation with your friend, okay. When it's part of the spark that causes the fire, that, it gives you this energy, this poise, the muscle, the gym, the new lifestyle, the energy, all of that, that's the value you're offering people. And that's the value of this podcast, is you're providing the value proposition to get up and move, because that's how big it is.
Yeah. So I had written, this is one question, but it has 7 parts to it. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like not a rapid fire or like a hot seat type of thing. Like I wanted to get kind of like your brief answer on each one of these. So yeah.
Are you suggesting that my answers aren't brief?
Yeah. Well, because, given all the variables here of the time, I'm trying to be mindful of your time as well.
You're being polite now.
I'm trying to be mindful of your time, unless you're cool with going a little bit beyond.
No, I'm pulling your leg.
Okay. Yeah, no, because
all right, I'm gonna try and be brief. Let's go.
No, because there's other things that definitely I would love to just get whatever you can give me, because I want people to hear why important this is.
You are the sweetest human being. You are the best. Go for it.
So people, including myself, have asked this question. So can I hear your professional advice? So first one. Even if I work people say this to me, even if I work 8 hours sitting at a desk, why do I need to be constantly walking or getting up if I know I'll be going to the gym for 1 to 2 hours? Why isn't my 1 to 2 hour gym session enough?
Okay, simple answer. The data. The data show that even if you go to the gym, the harm associated with excess sitting still comes to you. Gyms aren't, that's the data. My answer is, it's all about energy. If you're sedentary in your seat at work, you're sedentary in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about this? Yeah, thank you. How about sitting versus stationary standing, or just standing still versus walking?
Okay.
How about this? Which is superior or which is better? Standing still or sitting?
Okay. Again, back to the data.
Yeah.
We did studies where we gave people standing desks versus treadmill desks, okay, versus nothing. The data are really amazing, actually, and they're very interesting, but I'm going to summarize as follows. Okay. Health improvements, mental improvements, and productivity improvements are gained by standing desks almost exactly to the same degree as treadmill desks. How can that be? Let me explain. Because when you get somebody up and standing, first of all, they never stand still. I'm standing right now. I'm not standing still. You're standing. You're not. Okay. But that's not the point either, actually. What's the point is that if you get somebody up standing, they're more likely to go for a little walk. And that's the point. So if somebody's up and standing and you say, oh, we've got 10 minutes to the next meeting, what they say is, oh, I know, I've got to go and grab something. And off they go. If you're sitting down, right, in your chair and you've been there all day and somebody says, we've got 10 minutes to the next meeting, what do people do? Quick Facebook, slam off a few emails, blah, blah, blah. So the answer is, get off your bottom and the rest will take care of itself.
And how about this? I remember a while back, I could have sworn there was this little sound bite that I heard, but I want you to clarify if you could maybe say a little bit, talk a little bit about this, but does it still stand that the idea that cigarette smoking is healthier than prolonged sitting? You could clarify.
What a twisted way of answering the question. Again, back to the data. Okay. The first thing I've got to immediately say is, if you are a smoker listening to this right now, please consider choosing a quit date. All right? The data about the harms of smoking are irrefutable. Not everyone is ready to quit right now, but if you're listening to this, please consider setting a quit date. That is really important, okay? Number 2, everybody in modern society is sitting, and many people, as you know, working behind computer desks have prolonged sitting. And because so many millions and hundreds of millions of people are exposed to prolonged sitting and the harm that causes, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, mental illness, joint problems, and so on, and cancers actually, and so on and so forth, the total impact of that health burden is, if you like, as great as the total impact of smoking, noting that not everybody smokes, right? The fact that one does more or less than the other, honestly, Tony, is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter, right? If you're a smoker, please think about finding a quit date. If you're somebody who sits excessively, find methods to get up and move. Whether one is more or less harmful than the other is irrelevant. These are both parts of your life that you can take control of. There are great programs to help people quit smoking. There are great approaches to help people get up and prevent excess sitting.
So if we're looking at this, though, I'm saying, yeah, there you go. So I was going to say, if we're looking at this objectively, though, like what about countries like Europe, Spain, where they smoke cigarettes still a lot more heavily, I think, than America, but yet they still show more health correlates compared to what we have. Like, so like, just looking at that objectively, like, that's why I had to ask that too, is because I as a smoker, and I know there's so many things to dive into within that, just that one little idea, but like, is a smoker who smokes on a daily basis but gets up and moves better than someone who just sits around and is sedentary for 8+ hours a day?
I mean, no one has done that, to my knowledge. No one has done that absolutely specific study.
Yeah. But
the answer is, again, super simple. And let me now overlay it with a couple of concepts. If a person, and I spend half my time in France where people do smoke a lot, and interesting, the smoking data per population actually is not particularly different between France and the United States, by the way. More people smoke than you think. It's just in somewhere like France, public smoking is much more common.
Makes sense.
But people who smoke and move more are still going to be exposed to the risks of excess smoking. People who sit excessively, regardless of whether they smoke or not, are going to be exposed to the risks of excess sitting, right? So therefore, those two things, interestingly, are independent opportunities to be healthy. I look at it that way, not the other way. So in other words, if somebody is super active, that is fantastic, right? Right? That is fantastic. And we would strongly say, keep doing that. But since you're up doing that, now let's take the opportunity to talk about finding a quit date to initiate a smoking cessation program. There are lots of great methods to help people. Conversely, if somebody's sitting excessively and smoking, the same conversation occurs about the smoking, but now also we have a conversation about, hey, hang on a sec. Every time your boss finishes the Zoom call 5 minutes on, you get up and move. Every week you have a meeting with your boss and you always fall asleep. Why don't you have a walk and talk meeting? And so on, right? They're independent opportunities. However, there's one important thing that I would like to take this platform to emphasize is people with type 2 diabetes who smoke, right, really need to take this opportunity to listen to you and all your millions of followers to very seriously consider stopping smoking immediately. Really, somebody with type 2 diabetes who's a smoker, and I'm very sensitive to people's stress and why a lot of people like to smoke. I completely understand that. I'm not a smoker myself. But those individuals, please, I beg of you, go to the doctor and have a serious conversation about quitting smoking and make that the priority, because smoking plus diabetes is a particular opportunity to improve one's health, okay?
So, hey, I want to ask you this too, in terms of time, how are you? Like, I don't know, could we go over
I'm good. What time are we at in France? Hang on. What time is it? Actually, I'm not sure. I may not be that good. Give me a second.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for being sensitive to that, by the way. I do have
no
give me less than 20 seconds to
no problem.
that.
Yeah, there you go. Take your time.
No, it won't take 20 seconds.
Sure.
Having said that. Oh, I'm good.
Good?
I'm good for another 17 minutes.
20?
17 minutes. 17 minutes.
17. Okay.
17.
Cool.
1 7.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another thing. When they walk, They feel they have to walk fast, and because of that, it deters them from wanting to walk or get up. What's the slowest in terms of miles or kilometers per hour that a person could walk and get all the great health benefits? Like, what would that pace be equivalent to?
Yeah, again, let's go back to the science. It's a great question. When you actually measure a normal person throughout their day, and you average out all the walking that a person does, whether that's waiting in line at the cafeteria, whether that's sort of standing in line at the supermarket, whether that's rushing for the bus. So you measure all of those walks, about 40 a day, and you average them down. The average walking speed of a human being is about 1.1 miles an hour. It's like really, really slow. Wow. And when you think about it, it's actually quite obvious because most of the walking we do isn't speed walking, from Boston to Alaska. That's not how it works, right? Most of it is, going down, to the subway station. I know Boston. I don't know if they're called subways in Boston, but I know the subway system.
Yeah.
Most of it's going to the subway. I'm a public transport. I'm obsessive about using public transport. I love it. Anyway, so you're going down to the station, then once you've walked to the station, which is great, you're sort of standing around waiting. So that your average speed there is 0, right, for that period of time. So the question you asked me is, what average speed do I need to shoot for to get all these amazing health benefits? The point is, you don't need to shoot for anything. What you need to do is have in mind, put in your head that instead of waiting at my house and just calling Uber, I am going to leave a little bit more time, walk down to the subway station, catch the subway. Or even if the weather is fine, as it happens to be today in Boston, I'm actually going to leave a little bit of extra time. I'm putting it in my head, right? Intentionality, we now call this, right? I'm putting it in my head to leave a little bit of extra time so I can actually walk to my meeting. You might say, well, hang on, Jim, my meeting's in wherever it is, Rainston, wherever it may be, right? I'm not going to walk, 3.5 hours. Hang on. But I am going to get off the subway one stop earlier and build in a 20-minute walk, or I'm going to get on the subway. You know what I mean? I'm putting it in my head. So the answer to your question is not to focus on the speed, but it's to focus on the do.
Sure. Definitely. But here's another thing people can do. The people that I know who go to the gym, whether that's two times a week, every week, they could go on the treadmill and just put 1.1 on their treadmill, 1.1 miles per hour, for my North American people, whatever. I forget what that's equivalent to in kilometers.
Worry not. It's about 2.5.
Okay, but either way, they could put that there just to see how slow, because it's so funny. When I say, let's get up and walk, their mind thinks like, I have to do this like it's an exercise, like it's high intensity interval. I have to walk fast. And it's like, no, man, we're just taking this they can't even get that out of their head. And that's another thing that eventually deters them, because they think that I got to do everything very hard. And it's this concept, again, just to reiterate, is really simple, but yet we make it hard for ourselves. 1.1 miles per hour is amazing.
I've got to tell you a hysterical story. When all of this data was first coming out, as you may recall, we were working with Apple and Nike actually to develop systems to really make all these technologies accessible to everybody. And I had a great pleasure of going down to the Nike campus and meeting the CEO of Nike at the time. So where's the meeting going to be? Mm-hmm. And the fellow who was with me said, we thought that you wouldn't mind this. You're actually going to be meeting the individual in the gym, because Nike actually has sort of on-campus gyms. And he literally had, there were 2 treadmills next to each other. And I was in my suit, a bit similar to this one. I do have more than one suit, by the way. And we literally, had our meeting. And the first thing he said to me is, okay, so what speed are we going to go at, right? And he was like pushing the thing. And I actually said 1.5 miles. He said, no, that's no speed. I said, you're right, that's no speed, but we'll put it one and you'll see we can actually have a completely normal conversation at walking at 1.5 miles an hour. Well, actually, it was very funny, actually. He was at 2.1 in the end, because of course, you can imagine being the CEO of Nike, it's a somewhat competitive kind of environment. And I was very careful to make sure I was slightly slower at 1.8 miles an hour, but nonetheless, it was a speed we were comfortable at. That's the point. So if you're going for a walk with a friend, like you were saying after dinner, the funnest thing about it all is, maybe holding hands, or if it's with your kid, is being in tune with them, is to be in tune with the person you're with, right? Similarly, if I'm doing a meeting on a treadmill, I've now got these sort of silent exercise bikes as well, which some people like. The trick is not to do it so much that you're panting and sweating, you can't speak, but the point is to do it so it doesn't affect what you're trying to achieve. Right? So it's not the speed that's important. If you, on the other hand, want to say, well, I'm now joining a walkathon and we're doing a walk for exercise to stop breast cancer, whatever it may be, which, by the way, is associated with excess sitting as well, then you might want to be doing a bit of sweat, putting a bit of cardio into it. You see what I'm trying to say is it's a matter of what is to say, what's the objective? And I'm going to meet this objective by either doing the speed walk to get a bit of sweat going to prevent cancer, or I'm actually doing a meeting. And I'm going to do that at strolling pace.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've got 2 daughters, and you can't go shopping with your daughters at 2 miles an hour. Let me tell you that.
That's funny. So how about this? You were saying something about before, and this also makes me think for this next one here is that the treadmill office, right? Or having a treadmill by your desk. Some people will go, oh, I don't know about that, man. Having a treadmill at my desk, that's going to be, they say, they will be unable to concentrate and do their work. Like, what are your thoughts on the treadmill desk and being able to do work or be productive?
So again, let's just go back to the data. My opinions are worthless. The data are gold. We've done now multiple studies where we've literally put treadmills, quite good quality ones, into offices to actually see what happens. And it's actually fascinating, I have to tell you this, Tony. It's really, really interesting in the sense that it definitely, and actually one of the things we did do was measure productivity. So let me actually hook on that right now. That's very, very interesting because it's not what you expect. So we did all of this. We explained to people what to do, explained to people it's not a matter of walking fast. You have to focus on the job, not on the walking, right? Strolling for a meeting is great. Sometimes you're going to want to sit down, and ones we used are adjustable so that you can put your chair on, you can sit, you can do whatever you want. And off we went, and we measured everything. Now, we measured productivity, and the way we did it is not relevant to now, but suffice it to say, top-notch stuff published in a top journal. And what the data showed is that for the first 10 weeks of doing this is really important, productivity actually declines. It's you don't work as well. And if you think about it, it's obvious why, because you're changing fundamentally how a person works. Because most people aren't used to having a treadmill at their desk, right? But after 10 weeks, this is published in PLOS One, which is actually a really good journal, the data show after 10 weeks, once you got the hang of it, productivity improves, it passes baseline, and keeps going and going and going. You get more and more and more productive as you take this on. Think of your own story. You started doing this stuff and one thing led to another. That's exactly what happens. And all of a sudden you start off with the treadmills and all of a sudden you see on people's calendars, they're now scheduling their meetings to be walking meetings. So now you and I are having a meeting, both of us are on treadmills, and we're used to the idea that we're both on treadmills and we're sort of walking towards each other. It's kind of cool. This company set up conference rooms where there are 2 treadmills or 4 treadmills in a room, all facing each other, people walking towards each other. It's very powerful, actually. And that is exactly what happens. So there's the answer to your question is if you happen to work at a company that's going to allow you to do this, or you're working from home, do it, and it will work out for you. But be natural. Put it in your mind to be aware of yourself, and certain things will work and other things won't work. At Harvard, they examined what sort of tasks are done best or can be done best on treadmills. Certain things, like actually doing things like PowerPoints, all these sort of quite finicky things can actually be done really well on treadmills, actually. Typing, no problem. Dictation, no problem. Interestingly, this is not something I'm 100% familiar with, is writing poetry should be done at a table, in quiet, on a chair. Yeah,
Huh.
People do these intensely creative tasks, like writing poetry. I don't know why, but this is what they found. So the point being is not one size fits all, either for a person or the tasks of your job. There will be things that are better done seated. No problem. But there are other things, many things, particularly meetings actually, that can be done better walking and talking.
Awesome. And then how about this? Maybe this could be a yes or no question. So should people be eating, for the able-bodied, the people who could use their legs and feet, should they be eating their breakfast, lunch, and dinner standing up? Should they be ditching the chair, having their meal?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay. No. The number one recommendation for having good nutrition is make it into a social. Sit down with somebody, enjoy your food, enjoy the company of the person you're with, enjoy your time together, savor the incredible tastes of nature. That's important.
Awesome. So here it is. This is this one right here. It sounds poetic because life is a school, everything's a lesson within it, of course, within this wonderful place called life, or this wonderful thing called life. And so I did my own little research, my own little Tony Moze personal research that I did on both myself and my peers. So hear this out. It sounds a little poetic, but again, here it was. So here was a typical day. I would see myself. Eventually I broke out of it, but I still saw this in my peers. After 8 hours of lying down, they get up to sit down and have breakfast, to then getting up to sitting down in their cars, bus, or train rides for the next 20 to 90 minutes, to getting to work, to sitting down for the first hours of work, to getting up to going to eat lunch and sitting down for an hour, to getting up to going back to their desk and sitting down for the latter half of their work schedules, to getting up to going back into their cars, bus, or train rides for the next 20 to 90 minutes ride home, to getting into their homes to sit down and have dinner. And depending if they have the luxury of having separate rooms, or if that's their choice, they could eat dinner in a kitchen or a dining room. But either way, whether they eat dinner in a kitchen or dining room, or dinner in their living room, they then transition into laying or sitting down on their couch for the next 1 to 4 hours, watching television, doing late night office work, and or scrolling through their social media. So Jim, I counted 10 instances where people are getting up for a brief period of time to sitting down for an extended period of time. To calculate this, people were laying or sitting down between 12 to 17 hours a day. That's 60 to 85 hours a week of sitting. If I were to make the analogy, Jim, people are either sitting as if they were working double shifts or overtime, or sitting as if they were competing with the same amount of hours as a business CEO. I've come to the belief that sitting is the new profession.
I can tell you, I've spent 20 years working on this stuff. I've never heard anyone put it better than that. So here's this. You talk a lot on the talks or TED Talks. You talk to, you're on this wonderful episode series, and you've spoke frequently about the long-term effects of prolonged sitting. But what are like the signs or symptoms, the immediate symptoms that people will face? How could they know that they've been sitting for so long? Like, what are the immediate things that they feel, whether it's in a day, a week, a month, or within that first year? Imagine for a moment spending your whole life in a dark room. Let's scrap that. As people, we get very used to what we're used to. And something that is done as much and for as long as that prolonged sedentary lifestyle you're talking about isn't something you can see anything else apart from that constant sedentariness. It's sort of like being sort of submerged in a swimming pool permanently, right? After a while, you forget that there's anything outside of the space you're in. And my only plea to your viewers is to try something else and just get a smell of a better life. Because if you get up and you move out of that chair you will find it.
Wow. Super awesome. I want to say, Jim, thank you so much again for circling back and talking about this again. It was quite awesome. And again, I just want to thank you again. And I hope all the listeners, drop a like, comment, please. And of course, you can reach out to Jim. I'll leave all the information in the description below, where you could, potentially find your more of your content.
Well, thank you so much, and cheers to you.
All right.
Keep moving.